Saint Nicholas is a legendary man who would eventually be known in our modern traditions as Santa Claus. Though much of the details of his life are difficult to source, they've been passed down and mingled within myths and legends. By any measure, what we do know is it was a very remarkable life worthy of veneration. Let's dive into the original Father Christmas, Nicholas of Myra. Born around 270 AD in the coastal city of Patara, nestled in the Roman province of Lycia, which is in modern-day Turkey, his parents, Theophanes and Nona, were devout Christians who clearly instilled in their son a strong foundation of faith in God and charity. Little is known of them except that they were very wealthy merchants whose lives were cut tragically short by plague, leaving young Nicholas an orphan with a substantial inheritance. It's speculated that what spared his life were the last actions of his ill parents, sending him away to stay with his uncle, the bishop of the monastery of Patara. What set Nicholas apart early on was his motivation to live a life of piety and generosity with his wealth. He quickly committed to the priesthood, which led his defining role at a relatively young age as Bishop of Myra, a nearby city. While still young, Nicholas embarked on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land on an Egyptian vessel where he was unknown to his fellow travelers. The first night of the voyage, he dreamt that a storm would put the ship in peril, and soon after waking, he warned his crew. Darkened skies and mighty winds proved his premonition true. Under lowered sails and subject to strong waves that made it impossible to control the ship, the sailors feared for their lives despite Nicholas's reassurance. They pleaded with him to petition God to rescue them from their plight. As he did, the storm abated. But through the fray, one sailor who had climbed the mast to try and secure it fell and was believed dead. Nicholas prayed over the fallen sailor, who then revived as if he had only been asleep. In Jerusalem, Nicholas visited all the sites of a pilgrimage, but wanted to pray at the Cenacle, the last remaining church in its day, considered to have been the site of the Last Supper. As he approached, though the site was barred with heavy locked doors, they swung open and Nicholas fell to the ground in thanksgiving. As bishop, Nicholas's life became intertwined with tales of miraculous acts and heartfelt charity. Among his most celebrated deeds is the story of the dowry of the three sisters. Despite wanting to find good husbands to marry his three beautiful daughters, an impoverished father, who lost his wife to the same plague that took St. Nicholas's parents, was unable to afford dowries. A dowry was a typical marriage practice at the time, seen as financial compensation to the groom's family for taking on the financial well-being of a bride. Without a dowry, the girls were unlikely to marry. Worse than that, this meant they would likely be destined for slavery, or worse, work in brothels. Knowing of their plight, Nicholas, under cover of night, tossed a bag of gold into an open window of their house. As the story goes, it sailed into a stocking left by the fire to dry. In the morning, they were overjoyed with the discovery, and the first daughter was soon wed. This repeated sometime later, followed by the marriage of the second daughter. The father, sensing a pattern and eager to know the identity of their benefactor, would keep watch in the night until a third bag came flying through their window. Leaping up to catch him before he could disappear again, the father quickly recognized his bishop and thanked him. "Ah, Nicholas, it is you! You have saved my daughters from certain disaster." Not wishing it to be known, Nicholas instructed the father, "You must thank God alone for providing these gifts in answer to your prayers for deliverance." One day, while Nicholas was visiting a remote part of his diocese, citizens came to him with urgent news that the ruler of the city, Eustathius, had condemned 3 innocent men to death. Nicholas set out immediately, gathering what news he could along the way, and went directly to the executioner's field. There, he found a large crowd of people and the 3 men kneeling with their arms bound, awaiting their fate. Nicholas passed through, seized the sword from the executioner's hands, and threw it to the ground before ordering that the condemned men be set free. His authority was such that the executioner left his sword where it fell. Depending on the source, Nicholas would then rebuke either a juror who took a bribe to find them guilty, or the ruler of the city himself, Eustathius, as he attempted to flee on horseback. At one point during Nicholas's tenure as bishop, the region experienced a severe famine. Crops failed, and the people of the city were on the brink of starvation. As the spiritual leader, Nicholas sought divine intervention. One day, a ship laden with grain arrived in Myra's harbor. The ship was part of the Roman Empire's grain fleet, transporting supplies from Egypt to Constantinople for the emperor's stores. Knowing the dire need of his people, Nicholas approached the ship's crew and pleaded with them to unload part of their cargo for the starving citizens of Myra. The reluctant sailors explained that the grain had been carefully measured and recorded for the emperor, and any shortfall would lead to severe punishment. However, Nicholas reassured them, promising that no harm would come to them and that their cargo would remain intact. Somehow convinced, the sailors unloaded some of the grain which Nicholas distributed to the people of Myra. Miraculously, when the ship reached its destination in Constantinople, the grain's weight was found to be exactly as recorded. No amount was missing. The grain provided by the ship was sufficient to sustain the people of Myra, not just for the immediate crisis, but for several years. The surplus was reportedly used to plant new crops, restoring the region's food supply and ending the famine. As impressive as Nicholas's tenure as bishop would seem to be at this point, in 303 AD, the Roman Emperor Diocletian launched one of the most brutal persecutions of Christians in the empire's history. Known as the Great Persecution, its edicts order the destruction of Christian churches, banned Christian worship and gatherings, demanded Christians sacrifice to the Roman gods, or face severe punishment. Refusal to comply often resulted in imprisonment, torture, or execution. With Nicholas serving as bishop and a prominent Christian leader in the region, his open defiance of the imperial edicts made him a target for Roman authorities. Nicholas refused to renounce his faith or participate in sacrifices to Roman gods, putting him in open religious defiance and political rebellion. Thus, Nicholas was arrested along with many other Christians in Myra and throughout the empire. He was subjected to harsh conditions in prison. Historical accounts and tradition describe beatings, starvation, and other forms of physical abuse. But despite these hardships, Nicholas is said to have remained steadfast, offering prayers and encouragement to his fellow prisoners. The persecution ended with the rise of Emperor Constantine and the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, which granted tolerance throughout the Roman Empire and ended the persecution of Christians. Nicholas, with his fellow prisoners of conscience, were released and he could resume his ministry. Subsequently, icons of Saint Nicholas sometimes depict him wearing a bishop's stole, marked with scars symbolizing the wounds he bore during this period. As bishop, he likely attended the Council of Nicaea, convened by Emperor Constantine, the first of its kind in the young Christian church. His primary purpose was to address the Arian controversy and establish a unified doctrine in the church. In later accounts, during debate at the council, Nicholas is said to have slapped Arius, the offending heretic, across the face, earning him a rebuke and even imprisonment. Imprisoned yet again, he prayed for forgiveness and guidance, and was then met with a vision of Christ and the Virgin Mary, which was enough to restore his status with the church and council. He would go on to minister as Bishop of Myra until his death on December 6, 343 AD, which is celebrated as his feast day among the Orthodox Christian denominations. This became a time for gift-giving and acts of kindness, especially in Europe. Over time, his reputation as a benevolent gift-bringer evolved into the legend of Santa Claus. Even after his death, tales of Nicholas's intercession persisted. Owing to Myra's location and prominence as a port city, he would gain popularity as a patron saint of sailors and travelers. In perilous weather, sailors caught in storms invoked his name and reported miraculous rescues. Travelers lost in the wild were guided to safety by his apparition. His relics, including some of his bones, believed to possess miraculous powers, drew pilgrims from far and wide. In 1087, amidst fears of desecration by Seljuk invaders, a group of sailors from Bari, Italy, transported Nicholas's remains to their city. There, they built the Basilica di San Nicola, which remains a revered pilgrimage site to this day. Thank you for joining me on this inaugural video. Please take a moment to interact, subscribe, or press that like button so we can grow the channel and bring you more of the stories of these prominent people of history. Comment down below with any favorites you'd like to see featured next. Thanks again for watching to the end, and we hope to see you next time on Atlas Embers.